Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint podcast number 248, recorded live on June 1st, 2015, live from the watery state of Texas. I am your host, Todd Klindt, and even though I'm in different surroundings here, again, this was all brought to you by the fine folks at Rackspace. So go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com and check out all of our SharePoint offerings, see what we have out there. There's a live chat thing if you get lonely, all kinds of great things. So go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com. And I find myself, so obviously I'm on the road, and I'm getting ready to move to the next thing, the production notes, and I was getting ready to hit the little thing to change the slide behind me, except there's no slide behind me. Those of you that are getting the audio podcast, I'm in a hotel room. I'm in San Antonio. And so the background's obviously a little different. The video is different, trying to get the lighting to work and all that's been pretty crazy. But I took last week off and because of Memorial Day here in the U.S., and I would have tried to have Shane do this one or not do it this week because I'm on the road, but I missed you guys. I took last week off. I'm going to have to take one off again at the end of the month here. I'll be on vacation. So I decided to go ahead and persevere and power through. Also, for those of you that are getting the audio only, I'm not using my regular mic, so the audio might be a little off. I'm using a crazy little USB headset, which makes an adorable video, by the way. It looks like, I don't know if you guys back in the 90s got those catalogs from like PC Connection or whatever that had the woman in the corner with the headset on. That's kind of how I feel right now. I got the headset with the mic, or maybe breaking into a little Backstreet Boys, I don't know. But anyway, I got the headset on. It's a little different for me. But otherwise, production, I'm doing it from a hotel room. It seems to be going pretty well. I'm tethering it through my cell phone. My cell phone's bandwidth is literally 10 times faster than the hotel bandwidth. I did a speed test before I went online. The hotel bandwidth was less than 2 megabits per second, and when I did it on my phone, it was like 2021. So I decided to risk going through with my phone. Phone's on a charger, sitting close to everything. We should be fine. But first time I've ever done this. And okay, so some other production notes. I'm still planning on moving this 5 hours forward to 3:30 Central Time in the afternoon, and that's 8:30 Central UMT, something like that. The reason for that is a couple-fold. Number one, I want to start bringing some European guests in, and right now I do this at like 1:30 and 2:30 in the morning their time, and that's just not very cool. So I'm going to be doing that. But if you have comments about that, you can always hit me up at Todd Klindt on Twitter or todd.klindt@rackspace.com. Let me know what your feedback is on that. Don't have a time for when we're going to do that yet. Again, I'm going to be gone the last week of June for vacation. Then we got the July 4th holiday and all that. But I wanted to kind of give you guys some heads up about that, especially you folks in the chat room. Let me know what you think about that. I know for some folks, you're like, yay, I don't have to do this at home anymore. And other folks are like, boo, I can't do it during the workday. So let me know what you think. Still planning on doing that. Also, another piece of production notes is I bought a brand new podcasting machine, a Dell desktop, and it's all built and ready to go. And I've been testing it for a few days, and it seems like it's ready to do some podcasting, to meet all you crazy podcast hooligans and all that. So probably next week I will use that machine for the first time. Hopefully you guys will notice nothing different. But for me on the back end, I had to podcast with one machine and edit it with another one. It was all a big mess, but hopefully going forward that will go a lot easier. But its big coming out party will be next week, so hopefully you'll join us for podcast 249. Help me ring in my new hardware. Also, for those of you that are watching the video after the fact, I keep looking to my left because I don't have my 2 monitors set up here, so the chat room is over here. So I'm watching those guys to see what they're talking about. On to the topics. So this was a fun one. This week's topics. Let me get a drink. Let me moisten my instrument here. Shout out to Dickey's Barbecue Pit in San Antonio. Dickey's has some great barbecue. I had their brisket tonight. Can't say enough good things about it. A little spicy barbecue sauce. But the other thing that Dickey's has is free ice cream. So right by the door at Dickey's when you're leaving, they've got an ice cream machine, soft serve, and ice cream cones. Every single time I stay in San Antonio, I go to Dickey's for no other reason than the free ice cream. So Dickey's Barbecue Pit, right off of 410 here in San Antonio. Anyway, okay, so a couple of months ago, we started this new thing at the podcast here where the folks at cmswire.com started doing transcripts of my podcast. And this was something that I've been wanting to do for a while, wasn't sure how to do it, and just out of sheer coincidence, they approached me and said we'd like to do that. So they've been doing that for several podcasts now. I like it. I think it's a good thing, and it's been very good. Like I said, it was something that I wanted to have done. They happened to want to do it. It worked out great. So last week's transcript of the podcast drew many comments from on their website. So I wanted to address some of those because this might be the first time in my long nerd life that I've been attacked on the internet, and it was kind of crazy. But first, before we get into all that, let me talk a little bit about the process and how all this happens. So I record this thing on Monday nights, soon to be Monday afternoon, and I'm doing it with a Google Hangout on air, and then that records automatically into YouTube. But I can't get it out of YouTube right away. I have to wait for YouTube to do all their re-rendering and stuff on the back end, and then sometime an hour or two after I'm finished, I can download that MP4 file. And that's what I edit and put the lower thirds on and pull the audio and all that stuff out, and then publish back to YouTube, publish to my blog, whatever. What I do is either Monday night or Tuesday morning, whenever I can get that file for the first time, I just pull the audio out and I drop the audio file into Dropbox for the folks at CMS Wire. They grab it, they transcribe it, and our goal is for them to have the transcription finished and me to have the editing and rendering finished by Thursday. And then they post the article, I link it, everybody's happy. So that's how that works. All I really do is give them the audio file, and but they're the ones that come up with the hysterical pictures that go with them. If you don't read these, you should go check these out just for the pictures alone, because they are hysterical. And they also come up with the titles, much like the provocative title for podcast 247, Is It Time to Lose Your Windows Phone? Now, that's also very ironic because this very evening in my hotel room, which is all of about 400 square feet, I actually did lose my Windows Phone. That's beside the point. That's not what the story was about. But so they take my the podcast that I do, and they choose what pieces to put, and they try to make a text article out of this rambling that I'm doing now. And the thing that they focused on for 247 was the Windows 10 phone preview and my dislike for it. And, you know, I think the article is pretty fair. It's the stuff that I said. I can't really argue about it. But it ended up in text being a little saucier than I think I meant it in when I recorded it in the podcast. And it really raised a bunch of people's hackles, whatever a hackle is. I'm not sure if I have hackles. If I have hackles, I'm not sure if they're raised. I'm not sure if I should see a doctor about that. If my hackles are raised for more than 4 hours, I don't know. But there was a bunch of comments, 50 some comments in there in the article for that. So I thought I would address some of them. I really wish I had some time to read them all because they are just hysterical. I encourage you, even if you don't read the article because you're obviously listening to the podcast, you probably heard it. Don't even worry about my article. Read the comments below. They are hysterical. Things like, who gave this guy a computer? This guy's an idiot. Yeah, it cracked me up. It was just funny. And so I don't know that they all understand that this is a transcript of a podcast, and I didn't just sit down and write this article. Anyway, it was hysterical, all the flaming that I got. But I did want to address a couple of my favorite things tonight. But before I do, I wanted to give a little feedback because I got accused of a lot of things. In the comments, I was accused of being a hater, because haters gonna hate, and I was hating on Windows Phone. I was accused of having a bias against Microsoft. I was accused of being responsible for the Chicago fire. I assure you, none of these are true, despite the fact that it appears that Chicago, their NFL or NBA team, the Chicago Bulls, are going to steal the head coach from the Iowa State Cyclones, Fred Hoiberg. So now I'm a little upset about Chicago. But anyway, I was not responsible for any of these. So, but it was just fun. So I wanted to address a couple of those things. First off, I'm not a hater of Microsoft. I'm not a hater of a Windows Phone. I don't have a bias against Microsoft. My entire professional career has been based on supporting Microsoft products. I would not have a roof above my head. I'd have calluses on my hands if it weren't for Microsoft. I'm just not that. I got my MCSE in 1996. That's how long I've been doing this, nearly 20 years ago. I've been an MVP for 9 years running now. As an MVP, what do? I go out and I tell people how great Microsoft stuff is. That's what I've been doing. And Microsoft has been rewarding me for it for 9 years now. I'm not anti-Microsoft. If Bill Gates offered to let me wash all of his cars once a week for the rest of his life, I would probably do it. That's how much I like Microsoft. Balmer, once a month, maybe, but for Gates, for sure, once a week, every car that he's got. I love Microsoft stuff. I'm not a Microsoft hater, not even close. So those folks that went in thinking I was that guy, I'm not that guy. I'm really not that guy. And I'm also not the guy to like cause a bunch of drama on the internet. So it was funny seeing all those comments because it just clearly was not not even close to who I really am. But I did want to address a couple of things because I've gotten these comments before. So to recap what I said in the podcast last week, podcast 247, and was in the article, basically I said that I loaded the new Windows Phone 10 preview. I didn't like it. I didn't like it a lot, and I immediately put Windows Phone 8 back on my daily driver, my Lumia 830. And I mean, that's how it is. I think that was fair. And so, and I talked about how a few things I didn't like. One of the things that I didn't like, and kind of the big thing, was that you can't have individual tiles for individual inboxes or accounts in Windows Phone 10 like you can in Windows Phone 8. And for me, that's how I triage my mail. That's how I keep my stuff separate. I've got a work email tile, a home email tile. I've got another tile that combines a bunch of my Gmail and MSN stuff. And that's just how I work. I get that not everybody works the same way. I don't fall for that thing that I think my experience is universal. That's why I didn't just say this sucks. That's why I said, here's the thing that I didn't like about it. If you don't use your email that way, that's good. Then this isn't going to be a problem for you. And I have no problems with that. I'm also not the guy that cares if you like something I don't like. It doesn't bother me at all. But those are kind of the things that I talked about. And then I whined a little bit about the app gap on Windows Phone. So one of the things that came up a lot in those comments was, didn't you know this is a preview? Or what did you expect? This is a preview. Or this software isn't finished. I can't believe you're saying all these things. Of course I knew it was a preview. I said the word preview. The whole thing was based on it being a preview. Of course I knew it was a preview. I've been beta testing Microsoft software since NT4. Again, nearly 20 years. I get that it's a beta. I get that it's not done. But let's be honest with ourselves. Not all betas are created equal. I'm doing this podcast right now on a Windows 10 beta. It's live. It's good. I've got Windows 10 running everywhere. When Windows Phone 8.1, when the preview for developers came out, I ran that all the time. I know previews. I understand the thing. But that's the thing. The system didn't fail. I put the preview on. It wasn't going to work for me. And so I took it off. And that's fine. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. But more importantly, I put the preview on, I looked at it, and I provided them feedback. That's the whole purpose of the preview. I provided them feedback. I provided them feedback in the Windows Insider thing on the phone, and I also told you folks about it. So if you felt strongly and agreed with me, you could provide feedback for them as well. That's how the preview program is supposed to work. The system did not fail. That's how it's supposed to work. I understand it's a preview, so I left it on my backup phone. I've got a Lumia 635. I've got Windows Phone 10 on there, so I can play with it some more, learn some more stuff about it. But my daily driver is still running 8.1. It's all good. I understand it's preview. The other thing that people mentioned a lot was, of course, they won't take that out in reference to the inbox thing. Well, we don't know this. Stuff gets taken out of products all the time when we upgrade them. Just today, just on May 1st, Paul Thrott posted a blog post on all the things that are getting taken out of 8.1 when we move to Windows 10 on the desktop. So not the phone, but the desktop. Whole list of things that we're going to lose going into Windows 10.1. It happens all the time. For God's sakes, when we upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 8, we lost Spider Solitaire. Is nothing sacred? So yes, we lose things when we upgrade. We can't assume that when we upgrade from Windows Phone 8.1 to Windows Phone 10, that we won't lose this functionality of having separate tiles. We just don't know. So those are kind of the big things. But And the other thing I wanted to address was the app gap. So a bunch of people were like, there is no app gap. You know, you never need those apps anyway. You'd load all the stuff and you'd never use them. I know what I'm missing. I moved from Android 2 years ago. I know there's a whole list of apps that I can't run anymore that I used to be able to run on Android. So I mean, it's not like I'm upset because there's not enough fart apps on my Windows phone. There's a list of legitimate things that I would be using if I had them on my phone. For instance, my credit union. There's a Windows app, or there's an app for Android. There's not for Windows Phone. Just all kinds of stuff like that. The examples I gave last week about being in London and all the different tourist attractions. I'm not just a guy that hammers on the app gap mindlessly. It's a legitimate thing. I actually can name the apps that I would miss. But that being said, all that being said, and all that me making fun of the folks on the internet, I do welcome the feedback. I had a couple of conversations with folks on Twitter who were so enraged when they read that article that they didn't just want to leave a comment. They wanted to hit me up on Twitter. One guy said that he was ashamed that I'm from the same city that he was because he went to college in Ames, and he's ashamed to be from the same city as me. Holy cow. But anyway, I do welcome any of the feedback because, again, I don't get too wrapped up in it. It was kind of funny. I did cry myself to sleep a little bit for the first couple of nights, and I don't mind. I mean, you know, it's how it goes. But I welcome any of the feedback. Have at it, folks on the internet. And also, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You can find all of the podcast transcripts on CMS Wire on my author page. So I'll put a link to that. But you can go to cmswire.com/author/Todd-Klindt. And that's going to be all the stuff that I do for them. But again, that was kind of fun. That's the first time I've ever been at the end of that on the internet. Kind of cracked me up a little bit. I don't know, funny stuff. Okay. All right. So speaking of Windows 10, today has been June 1st. Today has been a huge day for Windows 10 for the desktop, not for the phone. For the desktop. For the last week or so, the new builds, if you're in the fast ring, again, you can be in the slow ring where you get the stable builds. You can be in the fast ring where you get faster, but sometimes they have more problems. The fast ring has been getting updates like lightning. They've been flying out like hotcakes or like something else that flies out a lot. Failed analogy there. Right now, I'm recording this podcast on a machine that's running build 10,130. And it's been pretty stable. Before that, I was running 10,122. It had a few issues. The start menu got goofed up, things like that. But 10,130 looks pretty stable. This, I think, is the first fast ring build that has the Hey Cortana stuff built in. I haven't played with it on this yet, but that's kind of cool. It's also the first one that has the Hello Windows thing built in where you can log in with the camera, so it'll just recognize your face. The interesting thing about that is it doesn't work with all hardware. So if you don't have hardware that supports that, which I do not, you can't set that up. But that's another interesting thing. They demoed that at Ignite, where they had a cloth over the camera on the laptop, and Joe Bellafiore just stood in front of it, pulled the cloth off, and just logged him in. It's kind of cool. But again, that's all been pretty solid. But that's not the only thing. So today they announced the release date for Windows 10. I would do a drum roll, but it would be kind of obnoxious with this. But Windows 10 will be available July 29th. So that is roughly 2 months from now, something like that. The fun thing about that is you can reserve your copy. You can reserve your digital copy of the Windows 10 upgrade. So if your Windows 7 or Windows 8 machine is fully patched and recently patched, you're going to get a little reminder in the system tray there telling you that you can reserve Windows 10 RTM. And I think what's going on is they're going to start seeding the bits down ahead of time so that not everybody downloads it all at once and then, overloads whatever servers. I think it's a great idea, but it's just hysterical that they're letting you reserve digital copies of things. That's and I'll be doing that. I'll be getting Windows 10 on there as soon as we can. There are a bunch of other Windows 10 things to talk about that came out today. One of them was they released the system requirements for Windows 10. for the most part, haven't changed much from Windows 8 or Windows 7. Things like for 32-bit versions, 1 gig is the memory limit. For 64-bit, it's 2 gig, things like that. They talk about, the different hardware you need for things like that. Another thing that they released today was the upgrade matrix. So if you're running Windows 7 or Windows 8, and within the first year of Windows 10 coming out, so before July 29th, 2016, if you choose to upgrade a Windows 7 or Windows 8 box before then to Windows 10, you can upgrade for free. And then Windows 10 is free for the life of that device. But depending on which version of Windows 7 or 8, Home or Pro or Ultimate or whatever, you get upgraded to different SKUs of Windows 10. So they've got a kind of a grid out for that. And then Paul Thurrott has another article with a few more questions about Windows 10 upgrades. Things like, if I've got a Windows 7 box and I upgrade it to Windows 10 and then I needed to wipe it down the road, how do I do a fresh install of Windows 10 if it's based on the upgrade? Answers to questions like that. The short answer is yes, you can do it. He talks about how in his article. So just a lot of really great Windows 10 stuff. I think it's going to run on all of our hardware. Like I said, the hardware requirements are not very great. I've put it on pretty much every device that's not a daily driver, because these are all previews. You should put them on your daily drivers. But I've got it on this laptop. I've got it on my little my little HDMI computer here, Wormy. Wormy is running Windows 10 right now, and he was previously hooked up to the TV here in my hotel room. I've got it installed on a couple of other laptops at home. I've not installed it on any of my tablet devices because the tablet experience hasn't been great, but it looks like in 10,130, it looks like it's getting better. So I may pick a sacrificial tablet and put Windows 10 on it. But it's getting there. It's looking good. I'm having a good time with that. So I think for the next couple of weeks, you're probably going to be hearing more about that, because that's something going on. Now, this is obviously the client side bit. We found out at Ignite that the server side bit, the newly named Windows Server 2016, would not be out until next year. So there hasn't been much movement on that, but that'll be the next big thing that we'll talk about. All right, in the last few minutes, I wanted to talk about some SharePoint stuff. You guys remember SharePoint, right? That thing that brought us all together, got us all excited about technology. So I posted a couple of blog posts here in the last week that I wanted to go over with you guys. The first one was creating a Wildcard DNS record for fun and profit. That's what happens when you come up with these wise guy clever titles. You misspeak them. But this was a blog post that I wrote really because I needed to write it. I needed to be able to reference it for my next blog post, and it seemed like it was a blog post all in its own. But this is something that I kind of learned learned in the last year when dealing with host named site collections. And that is this idea that you can create a DNS record that is a wildcard DNS record. So it is literally a DNS record for asterisk, the wildcard character we've all come to know and love. And when you create this wildcard DNS record, it essentially becomes a default value for your zone. So all of the other records that you've already got defined with A records or C names, or whatever, continue to work and they take precedence. But if somebody tries to look up a name that is not defined as an A record or a C name, instead of getting a host not resolved error from DNS, they'll get the wildcard record. So there's a couple of fun things that you can do with that. If you're not using SharePoint, you can use that to point somebody to, a web page that's like, hey, sorry, this host doesn't exist, whatever. If you are using SharePoint and you're using host name site collections, you can create this once and it will take care of all of your host name site collections. You don't have to worry about every time you create a host name site collection having to go in and remember to create the DNS record and all that. Depending on how you use hostname site collections, that may or may not be a problem. But if you're going to be making lots and lots and lots of them, this is one way to handle that, especially if SharePoint has its own domain, then that's a good thing to do. So that ended up being something that I hadn't really thought about before I needed to do one, and then I did it, and it's like, this is kind of cool. I kind of like this. So I wanted to have that blog post out there because my next blog post was how to rename SharePoint 2013 site collections without prayer or sobbing, and I suppose that should have probably been praying or sobbing. This is something that was new within the last couple of months. And starting with the February 2015 cumulative update for SharePoint 2013, we now have the ability to rename path-based site collections to host name site collections. Now, for the longest time, probably the life of this entire product and probably the life of the entire product before in 2010, we had the ability to rename host name site collections to host name part. Because like STS-ADM way back in the day had a rename site option, but it was only for host name site collections. So we already had that, but this is the ability to take a path-based site collection like portal.company.com/sites/podcasts and rename that to podcasts.company.com without having to do any kind of backup and deleting and restoring and the dance that we would have had to do before before this functionality came into the product. And it makes it really simple to ease yourself into hostname site collections, because now you can just run this command. It's actually 3 lines of PowerShell. Run the command. It keeps all of the content and all that kind of stuff. It's just got a different URL. So that's pretty cool. Now, when this came out, I was talking to Thomas Vochten about it. He did a session on hostname site collections at the SharePoint Evolution Conference, and this is one of the things that he mentioned. And he and I were saying, that's nice and all, but I wonder if you can use it to rename a path-based site collection to a different path-based site collection. And I was busy, I had demos, and then I had my Ignite stuff 2 weeks after, and I didn't want to play with my demo environments too much and break them. So after that all got done and I got relaxed from Ignite, I went in and tried it, and that worked as well. So essentially what you do after you've got that February patch on is you go into PowerShell, because everything's cooler with PowerShell. Go into PowerShell, grab your SP site that you want to rename. So, do a, get SP site blah, assign that to a variable, and then you set a new URI object. So in the blog post, I do $URI equals new object system.uri, and I put in whatever the host name URL will be. And then on the site collection object, I do a .rename and pass it the URI, the object that I created. And that worked for me every time. Now, one of the things that they mentioned in the knowledge base article for this is that you have to run the refresh sites in configuration database method on the content database that the site collection is in. So without getting too far into the weeds, every site collection has a certain, site, every content database has certain site collections in it. But in order for SharePoint to be able to render those site collections, it needs to, at some point, it needs to make the decision, which content database do I look in? So your config database has a table of all the site collections in your farm and which content database they're in. Back in the old days, in the dark days of SharePoint, when we were shuffling around, things like that, you could get orphaned site collections. And an orphaned site collection would be when the table that the config database had about which site collection was in which database didn't match the actual reality of which site collections were in which database. So you would get site collections that were, that the config database thought was in one content database that wasn't, that kind of stuff. So one of the things that you could do was detach the database, and when you detach the database, SharePoint would go through and flush all that database's site collections out of the config database, and then you would mount it again, and when you mounted it, SharePoint would do an inventory and look at all the site collections in that content database. So this method, refresh sites and configuration database, is a way to do that without detaching and reattaching your content database. So when I was doing this, I would have to run that refresh sites and configuration database, and then a couple of times I had to run an IIS reset. But then it all worked. I had no problems with it at all. So you can read the whole blog post, including pictures, at http://rename site collections. So I show how to do that. And then I also do an example of path-based ones. So I take portal.company.com/sites/old path, and I rehome that to portal.company.com/sites/shiny new path, and that seems to work. So I didn't do a lot of testing with this. I haven't used it in production anywhere. So if you're thinking about using it in production, for goodness sakes, test it in your test environment. But on the surface, it looks like this works fine for all of your site collection renaming needs. So this is pretty exciting. This is something that I can think of a bunch of times in my past that I could have used something like this. So I was glad that that was there. I was glad that Thomas and I chatted about it a little bit. I was glad I had some time. All right. So, so in the chat room, and I apologize, I'm not looking at the camera here. In my link, I linked the knowledge base article. And the knowledge base article does specifically call out that you cannot use this method to move these back and forth. But so actually, I'm gonna click this link because I think this is the other thing. So I think, yeah, so the thing you guys are chatting about, Jeff and Drew in the chat room, is that's the rename method for site collections. And that's the thing that I mentioned has been there forever, but it only is there to rename hostname site collections from one host name to another host name. And that's been there maybe since SharePoint 2007, something like that. But that has never worked to convert path-based to hostname or hostname to path-based. That rename, that was only to rename hostname site collections from one path to the other. So that's why this one's got a little different name. And this is what well, it does have the same name. But anyway, but that's all there. So that's good. In the chat room, lots of discussions about doing it in test environments as opposed to production. Yeah, just because I got it to work in my test environment doesn't mean you should do it in production. So anyway, so that was the stuff for this week. I'm going to go ahead and move to promotion now, self-promotion. I don't have my timer running because it's my phone and it's doing the thing. But so last week I mentioned that I was going to be speaking at the Iowa SharePoint user group on Thursday. We had some folks that were out of town and all that, so we bumped that meeting up to June, actually I think it's 18th. Yeah. So I think Thursday, June 18th, I'll be doing that talk at the Iowa SharePoint user group. If you're in Iowa, swing by. It's the Microsoft office down in Des Moines. But basically, I'll just be talking about the stuff they covered at Ignite, the new things in SharePoint 2016, all the other crazy stuff. Wendy Neal is also going to be doing some talk, and I forget what she's going to be presenting on. But that's fun. That's Thursday afternoon. And then my next engagement is the Mississippi PowerShell user group. That is August 11th at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. Haven't decided yet what I'm going to talk to about with those guys, but it should be good. Month after that, September 18th and 19th, is SharePoint-A-Looza down in Arkansas. Mark Rackley's little shindig that he puts on. Again, haven't decided for sure what I'm going to be doing with those guys either. And then I missed, oh, sorry, it's in Missouri, not in Arkansas. Missouri, Branson, Missouri. And then I should have mentioned this one earlier. I normally do them in alphabetical order. I'll be speaking at SP TechCon in Boston in August. That's August 24th through the 27th. And I'm going to put that, change up my notes because I copy this from week to week. So we'll just go ahead and put that there. You chat amongst yourselves for a minute. Oh, that's the spot right there. Okay. So SP TechCon in Boston, I'm going to be doing a session on PowerShell with SharePoint Online. And then I think I'm doing an upgrade session. I forget exactly. And they don't have the site completely finished yet with all the topics, but I will be there. Of course, if you're at any of these events, give me a shout out and let me know. I'd love to say, hey, I'd love to introduce myself, chat with you, find out what you're doing, that kind of stuff. And I've got a couple other things in the hopper. We'll see what's going on, but that's it for tonight. So I want to end this thing before my internet access poops out. So thanks for the chat room. I'll be around for a bit because I got nothing else going on. I'm just sitting in this hotel room. But thanks to everybody. I'll be back next week in my home regular studio with my new podcasting machine, probably recently flamed on CMS Wire. They'll probably be demanding my resignation, all that kind of stuff. That was a lot of entertainment. I'd never seen that before. So thanks everybody. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week.